I am here with Alex Svetski, and he is the founder and CEO at SatLanus. How's it going, Alex?
Good, Steve. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. I'm excited to kind of unpack your successes. But before we get there, let's talk about how you got started. What's your background?
So I was studying as a civil engineer. I guess it depends how far you want to go back. But I dropped out of university, took my scholarship money, put it on the stock market, 10x'd it, or actually almost 20x'd it. Thought I was a genius. I did my little spreadsheet. I was like, okay, in 10 years' time, I'm going to be a billionaire. So watch out, world, here I come. And then I blew up, lost everything, got sort of $250,000 in debt, and then yeah, had to drop out of university to pay the bills. And I started knocking on doors because it was the only thing I could get on short notice. And kind of one thing led to another. I built a sales company, made some money, had my business partner steal all the money, run away. Then I started another company. I got into renewable energy, built that up, then got rug pulled by the government, lost a bunch there, started again, got into hospitality for a little while, kind of had some wins and failures there and vowed I would never touch that again. And then I got into tech kind of almost 10 years ago now. Built one little project, sold that. It was like a very small little payroll automation thing. Then did my first venture funded thing. That didn't succeed. Kind of had my first real run at trying to build something there. And then, yeah, kind of that sort of led me to my Bitcoin company, which was the one that I somewhat exited. And kind of spent some time writing, and then here I am building again. So anyway, that's kind of like a very succinct history. There's a real funny story with I was on My First Million with Sean Puri like ages and ages and ages ago. It was one of the early shows, but I talk about the whole story there. It's fucking hilarious if anyone wants to listen to it. But yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, the sort of trials and tribulations, the ups and downs of
hmm
taking the losses, moving on, doing the next thing. What was the time frame between each one of these? Like when you went from renewable energy to like hospitality, was it months,
No time
years?
frame. No time frame. Like I would like whatever would blow up, and I would just be like on to the next thing straight away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of somewhat now that I'm a little bit older. I regret like not taking some time in my life to just like relax for a minute and just like breathe between getting punched in the face. So my whole theory on life was like, all right, I just got punched in the face. How about I just do it again? So kind of rinse and repeat.
Nice. So let's start with the first piece here of preparing. I think that's one of the number one questions that I get regularly is how to prepare a business. So throughout the course of the ups and downs, the exits, let's talk about how you prepared. So when you were getting ready or you kind of initially thought you were going to sell, what were some of the things that you did?
I think so. So my exit was not a traditional exit. My exit was more of a founder exit only. So the I kind of sold my stake, and then a new CEO came in and took over. And it also wasn't a traditional setup. Like I had sold a previous. So let me think through this because the different mechanisms were very different depending on the kind of business I sold. So the first thing I ever built and sold was a little payroll automation app, and that thing was like I built it as it was almost like a widget. It plugged into the bank. It plugged into the what do you call it, the time management software that a hospitality venue would use, and it plugged into the accounting system, and it was almost like a widget. And these guys did absolutely no DD. They were like, okay, we want that product, we like what it does. I did a demo, they paid me 100 grand, and I walked away. So it wasn't a fancy exit, it wasn't anything sort of special. The second one was the hospitality store. So that was I had a cafe, and in the end, like I got sort of we went through this whole process. Like I, you know, built out showed them the financials. They came and they spent time in the shop, like working with the staff and this and that and all this kind of crap. And it was funny. We went through like a 3 or 4 month process, and in the end, they bought the site and they shut the business down and they put a whole new business in there. I was like, what the fuck? So, and they bought it because the site was just so good. Like I had this corner site right in the sort of the main strip of in Brisbane in Australia, and the cinema was right behind us. So like, of all of the stuff that I did to kind of represent the business as a thing that was doing well, they bought it for the site. So I was like, okay, so that was like all of this extra sort of due diligence preparation for no reason. And then the sort of the most formal of them was the app Amber, which was the Bitcoin company, and that one was more involved. I don't know how much detail to go into here, but essentially everything from documenting out sort of the cap tables, the ownership structures. We had a bunch of safe notes outstanding, so we needed to understand what sort of the cascading dilution looked like, and what is the new CEO coming in and buying from me. We also had some sort of the it wasn't a straight cash deal. The deal was a small deposit up front with some, like a long time frame and a long period of being paid off. So there was a bunch of sort of mechanisms in there. A lot of the time went back and forth on structuring the actual, the financials of the deal. And I guess part of that was because the incoming CEO wasn't really as sophisticated as what you might get if you were selling to like a private equity firm, for example, or someone buying the entire business, right? He was more coming in as an operational CEO. He wanted to buy my shares. I was kind of done with Australia at the time. This was sort of right in the middle of the COVID shitstorm, and I was like, I am never going back to that country again. I was like, I'm done with the government. I'm done with all of that sort of stuff. So I was somewhat of a motivated seller as well. So even for a technology company, I would say that we were that exit process was much more light touch than what one might anticipate for a more proper exit, should I say. So, yeah, man, to kind of summarize, we went through, that sort of documentation process, understanding, what is actually coming in, what's not going in. And then, the handover was quite lengthy, with everything from sort of permissions to team introductions to integration into the team and sort of all of that kind of thing. So, yeah, man, it was a lot. It took a good 3 or 4 months to really get it all done, and even then, sort of, there was a tail sort of period where I was in touch for handover purposes and kind of advisory and this and that, and I think that almost lasted a year, and then I was kind of like washed my hands of it, and I was done.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of touched on COVID there for a minute as to timing. That was my next question about when the right time to sell is. Everybody's different. Every chapter is different. Every business is different. But in your experience, if somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about selling, when is the right time?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. So for me, financially speaking, it was the wrong time. It was really like I got a real short end of the deal. I walked away with a real fraction of what I would have had in the past. What I would have had if had I stuck around for, let's say, another 2 years, for example. That being said, for me, part of the timing was a whole bunch of personal reasons. One, I had sort of gone to war with the Australian regulators and the government along a whole bunch of things. One is they were trying to sort of like push me and the business into overloading on compliance, and sort of my pushback was, I was building this Bitcoin company to disintermediate banks, and I had started to slowly, like my compliance team was as big as my product team. I was like, what the fuck am I building here? Like, I didn't get into this business for this. So I had lost sort of the raison d'etre behind why I was building this product and why I was building this business. Like, I didn't like the business anymore. Then there was other things, like I'd met my wife at the time. We wanted to get married. I wasn't interested in going back to Australia. We wanted to live on this side of the world, so sort of the US side of the world. So a bunch of things didn't sort of add up. And also the other thing was the timing. So like part of the process was finding someone who really wanted to be a new face of the brand that we had built, because a lot of the product was built around me and my personal brand, because I had a bit of a personal brand in the space. Like, I'd built this whole profile on Twitter and writing for Bitcoin Magazine and being on stage and all this kind of stuff. Me and Mark Moss wrote that book together, all this kind of stuff. And what the business needed was the kind of right person to come and take over that. So it was kind of, I guess my answer to your question is that I think it varies very much person to person, situation to situation. It's very situational. And those factors are going to be unique in every single setup, in every single deal, in every single situation for every single buyer and seller. And for me, I would say that it was probably 80% personal and 20% commercial as sort of the reasons why selling it. So I left a lot of money on the table, but my life significantly improved once I walked away. Like different doors opened up. I did other things and got married, fell in love, like all this sort of stuff. So my personal life, very much like increased in quality. My economic life decreased a lot in quality, but whatever, that's the thing. Like I'm one of these like entrepreneurs who will just go find something else to do, and that's exactly what I did.
Nice. Yeah, the opportunity costs. I've talked about it a lot on the pod about how, just going through any form of a transition or transaction, like an exit, regardless of the size, just relieves you to go do something else, whether it's personal or business related. And as in your 20s or 30s, it's just so valuable to just go and try something else and just continue to do and try different things. I think that there's just so much opportunity cost associated with it. So when it comes to mistakes, my favorite, my favorite topic, we kind of touched on some, but what would you say were some of the highlighted mistakes that you made when you were going through these deals?
Oh God, man. How much time do you have, right? Like every mistake in the book. I would say sort of, let me list a couple. So one of them was kind of rushed preparation. So and I think everyone goes through this to some degree, especially people who are like first or second time exits, is like you're not set up for exiting in the first place. And if I look at the three sort of, again, I always use air quotes for exits because they weren't like, what you would consider textbook exits, but I guess what is a textbook exit? I don't know. But the first one was definitely not. There was no preparation. It happened as an accident because I showed one guy that, hey, I built this app, and he's like, oh, this guys that I know, we're trying to build something similar. I showed them, they're like, oh, we'll give you 100 grand for it. I was like, okay, sure. So there was like zero preparation, right? The second one was kind of similar situation, but similar in terms of preparation because I had to sell out of that because I had just like had enough of hospitality, and I was like, I'm fucking done. This is way too much work for way too little payoff, and I'm out of here. But I had zero preparation in the business, like as a preparation for exit, right? So I had to go and get all of my accounts sorted out, like get a bunch of systems in place, put the manuals together and do all that sort of stuff. But as I said to you in the end, it was all for naught because these guys ended up buying it for the site. So I went and did all this preparation. I was like, I got it done this time. And it was like, yeah, well, thanks, man, but we'll just buy it for the site. So kind of goes to show that, you can't be prepared for everything. In any case, what other mistakes have I made? I guess you could tie this to, maybe on that second one, I had understood the outcome for the buyer was the business. I didn't actually understand that they wanted it for the location, or maybe I was blinded to that. I had put so much work into this business over the preceding 3 years that I really thought they loved the business, and they as I said, they showed a bunch of interest along the way, or at least what I thought was interest. Maybe I was too young and stupid. I think I was 26 at the time or whatever, so I was too young and stupid to really sort of sense that. And and maybe had I known that it was the location that they wanted, I might have approached the whole process differently, because if they wanted the location that much and they were willing to buy my business to pay a premium to get the location, maybe I could have kind of tried to sell the location publicly and might have had a few, bidders, and I could have maybe bid the price up. Maybe I could have got double for that thing. So, I didn't really quite understand the asset that I had or where the value was. So I think that's another mistake, is not really understanding what I had in my hands to sell. And, maybe a third one I'll just throw in there is structuring deals, like I spent a lot of time structuring the last exit in such a way that was quite fair and quite robust. But as much as you can structure deals and put things in place and everything like that, um, particularly like sort of earn-out models or payout models are very difficult because people can essentially renege on them, or they don't sort of follow through, or they're sort of late, or the timelines kind of get thrown out the window and all that sort of stuff. It's very hard to do anything about because, like, what are you going to do? Lawyer up? And then if you lawyer up, you sort of end up in a situation where you kind of could kill the golden goose that's supposed to pay you. And there's like kind of things get very, very messy. So sometimes it's better, to take an even bigger, for example, haircut just to take your stuff off the table and move on, right? So I think there'd be a whole lot of things I would do differently if I had to go again.
Yeah, and ultimately, in my experience, and a lot of people that I've talked to, chapter of your life plays into it too. Like
Yes.
where you're deciding if you're going to take less up front just to get a deal done and then move on, or like you said, lawyering up. That's probably one of the number one things that comes up is there's never a clean deal, and things go wrong, things happen. Just two humans exchanging any good or service, there's always going to be something that happens, and yeah, the legal stuff is always a crazy one. So I want to talk about valuation. You mentioned like personal branding. This is one that I talk about a lot, and it comes up all the time now with the personal brand sort of rise of people building businesses around their Instagram audience and their social media presence solely. So in your sort of experience with driving value, what could somebody listening to this, let's say they're in the trench operating day to day, what are some things that they could do to get a multiple, like a higher multiple than they think they can have, and drive that value up?
Man, I think related to the personal brand thing, like I've kind of my last essay that I published on Substack was called "On the Virtue of Ignorance," and I've kind of like made a super conscious decision over the last 3 or 4 months, particularly since my first son was born in August last year, to basically get the fuck offline. I don't know what other way to put it, but dude, I'm so done with the noise and the whole content and personal branding and showing up and all this sort of stuff. Like, I figured that you sort of, I shouldn't even say sort of, you become a prisoner to your own sort of personal brand. And maybe some people like that, like the Hormozes of the world and all that sort of stuff, sure. But honestly, I think like building a business that is independent of your own personal brand in particular is, to me, at least at this stage of my life, where I've been as someone who had built a personal brand and done all that sort of stuff, I will never, ever, 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 ever go near building a business around my personal brand ever again. Never, never, never. If I could have a magic wand and I could delete everything that I've ever done or said or fucking shown up online, like I could be a ghost again, I would totally do that. It's a little bit difficult these days because of the way the internet functions. But dude, I have no fucking interest in any of that shit anymore. I want a good business that makes money, whether I'm there or not, or whether I show up, or who cares what I did? Like, and I want to be able to spend time with my wife, with my son, travel around, show up to work or not, doesn't matter. And work on the things that I actually care about. Like, I got so caught up with like being this Bitcoin personality and all this fucking nonsense over the years. And yes, it opened up doors for me. Like, I met everyone from, Jack Dorsey to Mark Moss to Alex Jones. Like, I met all of these cool people, and yes, it sort of built my network and it opened up doors and all that sort of stuff. So I will granted say that definitely is, one of the benefits. But man, over the last, like, particularly since sort of the rise of ChatGPT and like, I think Elon was a godsend taking over X and all that sort of stuff. I think there's been, extreme positives, but man, just something about the online sort of world, particularly social media, kind of has devolved into everything feeling like basically like the digital strip mall. Like, everyone's trying to sell you something. Everyone's become a content creator. Everyone's got a personal fucking brand now, and it's just so like noisy. And I I guess I'm the eternal contrarian. So when I see all of that shit happening, I'm just like running the opposite direction. I'm like, okay, how can I build a business that is completely independent of the need for a personal brand? And I think if there's a way to generate value there, I think that is really powerful because it just untethers you from the obligation to be this face. So take that for what it's worth, but it was a very different opinion. I have a very different opinion now than I had a couple of years ago on this stuff.
And that is basically the exact segue into the finale question. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell Alex 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, that would be that would be one of those things. That would be definitely one of those things. I mean, another thing would be buy Bitcoin earlier, you idiot, and stop spending your Bitcoin on building a business. That would be the second thing. Um, but yeah, man. I mean, are you happy with me using that one, or do you want me to pull another one? I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah, I think there has been, I want to say 10 or 11 people who have said Bitcoin, that they say, I wish I would have bought Bitcoin earlier. So that is kind of a staple on the
Yeah.
podcast,
Mhm.
which is pretty funny. Haven't heard of one where people don't want to sell Bitcoin to start businesses. So I guess that's a unique twist to it. I like that.
Yeah, I burnt a lot of Bitcoin in the early days trying to spend on my own projects when, what I should have done was just hold on to the Bitcoin and relax. Um, yeah, man. I don't know. If I was to give you a realistic one though, I think what I would tell my younger self is to kind of related to what I said in the beginning of the call is that opportunities aren't going away and to kind of slow down in between opportunities. I think probably the thing I did too much of was doing too much for lack of a better term. I was always from one thing onto the next. Whether it succeeded or failed, it didn't matter. Like I didn't take any breaks. And I think that sort of came from a place of, if I'm being honest, like some sort of place of scarcity or lack or something, thinking that the opportunity would run away and that, I have to capture this opportunity now. When, sort of the older I've gotten, man, like people make money for the dumbest shit, honestly. Like, if we're being honest, like the kind of things you see around, it's like, people making money, it's like, okay, dude, there is more than enough opportunity. You don't have to worry. Relax for a little bit, take a break, and come back and do something later. Like life is not gonna pass you by. So, and the last thing I'll say there is obviously a tension between that because you don't want to be too sort of lax about it. There is times and periods where there's like a confluence of forces that you want to sort of hit. And if you sort of get that timing right, like, for example, there was a time for Facebook, right? There was a perfect time for Instagram. There was a perfect time for Uber. There was sort of like timing for a lot of this stuff. But at the same time, opportunities are infinite. So, take a break and come back refreshed. That would be my lesson. There we go.
Well said. I think that resonates with everybody listening to this, with me for sure. Taking a break is difficult, for sure, from venture to venture. So that takes us to SatLanus. Walk us through it. What is it, and where can people learn about it?
Really simple is I'm trying to build a modern day creator platform built for what I'm calling the experience economy. So as you can probably tell, I'm kind of done with social media and sort of this sort of online world. I think, AI to me is very interesting in the sense that not in the traditional sense. Everyone sort of they see AI and they're like sort of chasing, oh, how can I invest and build and do stuff in AI businesses. To me, the question I'm asking is everyone's kind of like zigging. Like, how can I zag? What industries is AI inadvertently going to make stronger because people are sort of repelled or pushed away from it? And, to me, sort of a couple that come up is the events or experience sort of industry is like, AI can't replicate people getting together, right? What else? The sort of the travel industry. So travel, trips, experiences. Like, so AI is not gonna, sure, it might help you plan a trip, but it ain't gonna go on the trip with you, and it's not gonna, sort of be there with you. So kind of, I boiled it down as like AI can't copy access, taste, or experiences. And so when I say access, I think of like communities, memberships, clubs, stuff like that. Taste, things like curation, etc., and experiences would be sort of anything from travel to events and all that sort of stuff. These are the things that AI can't copy. So you're sort of seeing like, with AI kind of flooding the internet with slop and social media kind of like devolving into just clickbait and nonsense and all this kind of crap, you're kind of seeing this. And simultaneously, AI destroying the defensibility of like information and knowledge products. I think there was sort of the heyday of like selling stuff online was, if it's not come to an end, it's sort of like coming to an end, or if it, it was nearby. So, smart creators and all this sort of stuff are moving towards events, communities, memberships, clubs, retreats, gatherings, experience, curation, all this kind of stuff. They're kind of coming back to the real world. And my thesis is that there's no good experience-centric creator platforms that smart creators and curators and stuff like that can build a community around, build events around, build memberships around, and monetize. So I'm trying to build a new kind of creator platform, basically, where you can create events and communities, you can create calendars, experiences, you can monetize, you can, and this is sort of where Bitcoin comes in, you can do it globally from day one. So we have Bitcoin built into the DNA of the product. So you, like, very simply, you can spin up an event and you can sell tickets in Bitcoin, stablecoin, or fiat, credit card, whatever. You can build out a community, and you can attach a calendar to it. So then people in the whole community can list events, and you can give the calendar itself could have a wallet. And let's say the calendar can then distribute dividends from the calendar or from the community into the different events, for example. So there's all sorts of interesting stuff you can do when you embed money into the actual infrastructure or the DNA of the product. So this is what we're doing. It's a relatively largest vision, and the way I like to approach business these days is to try and understand what is a thesis, or what is a macro trend, like where are things going, what are the bigger sort of cycles or trends or like movements that will kind of give you almost a like a tailwind behind where your business is. So that way you don't have to get everything right. You can kind of be in the right place at somewhat the right time, building somewhat the right product, and you can kind of get some momentum from forces that are external to you. So that's my theory. That's a thesis. I think we're going to build something special out of this. We raised like a seed round last year. Or sorry, wait, not last year, 2024. We're in 2026 now. So, and we're going to try and build, hopefully, what's going to be the first non-wallet miner exchange Bitcoin product, right? So like, because I think over the last 15, 20 years, every single Bitcoin related product has either been a wallet, an exchange, or a miner, or some sort of shitcoin casino, right? So something like that. So see if we can build a real product.
Nice. Very nice. And where can people find it?
Satlantis.io. So
Very
nice
cool.
and easy.
And where can people find you?
Me? Nowhere these days. I'm not active on Twitter anymore. I'm not active on Instagram. I'm not active anywhere, actually. I will publish maybe the odd essay here and there on Substack. So Svetski writes. If people but if you just search my surname Svetski, you'll find me online.
Right on. All right. Well, wherever you guys are listening on iTunes or Spotify, the links that Alex mentioned will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your wisdom.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Steve.